Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Hansen, founder of the Leadership Coaching Network, where our mission is empowering African leaders as agents of transformation with people, organizations, and society. This presentation from our Coaching for Transformation course is all about self-discovery learning as the foundation of coaching. In it, you will understand the difference between a self-discovery learner who is learning from the inside out and one who receives advice from the outside in. Self-discovery learning is the very foundation of what you will learn in coaching. I hope you enjoy this video. So, here we are with our first topic for today. What is coaching all about? It's about self-discovery learning. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about self-discovery learning, and then we're going to have a chance to interact about that in some breakout rooms, and then I'll share a few more ideas, and then we'll also have a chance to talk about those. So it's kind of particularly in the first session, just to get us started, I'm going to be sharing a little more than I normally would, just because there's some basic content to share. And in sessions 2, 3, and 4, there's going to be a lot more sense of you having the chance to put the skills into practice right away. Today, we're not even talking about skills yet. Today, we're laying the foundation, because a coaching mindset determines everything else. If you don't have a coaching mindset, the skills you learn aren't going to be very valuable, and you probably won't even want to learn them. If you do have a coaching mindset, then you're going to see how the skills will really help you move forward in coaching. So, here's the question we start with. How do most people grow and learn? Well, certainly one way is the way we're most familiar with. You know, we read books, we listen to lectures, someone gives us information, whether it's through reading a book they wrote, or whether it's listening to a lecture, or maybe even watching a video. But there is another way to learn that's less familiar to most of us. And that is learning through discovering something on our own. So you see these students here in the chemistry lab actually, looking at that flask, and you see how interested and excited they look. That's because they're learning something right immediately. It's happening instantly as they are participating in it. And that's the kind of learning that we are all about with coaching. Or to take an even clearer example, a lot of you probably played football when you were young. Maybe some of you still do. How did you learn to play football? Did you listen to lectures where someone, diagram plays? Or did you get out with a ball on a field somewhere and start kicking that ball around? Well, obviously, you started with the ball. And that's the way any skill happens. So the first thing we need to be really clear about in our minds is that coaching is a skill. Coaching is not a set of ideas like chemistry or biology or economics. Coaching is a skill, and therefore we need to learn these skills in the way every skill is learned, which is through practice. That's why this whole course is based on the action learning cycle that I showed you just a few moments ago. The action learning cycle is the way any skill is learned, and it has to do with getting some information. Okay, here's the ball. And then we plan how we're going to practice. We do that practice. We reflect on the practice. Then we come around to learning something new because of our reflection, and we keep going through that cycle over and over and over again. All the famous football players in the world, whoever your favorite is, started learning football that way, just the way you started. by kicking a ball around on a field. And so do people learn best through listening to a lecture or through interaction? So there's a picture of me giving a lecture at AGST, and nothing wrong with that kind of learning. I've done a lot of that. And here's a picture of me with a couple of students having tea together. Both kinds of learning are possible. What we are about in coaching is the second kind, the learning that comes through self-discovery, the learning that comes immediately, right in the moment, through conversations. So, receiving information is a good way to learn, but self-discovery is the kind of learning that we are about in coaching. We are trying to help people come to that aha moment that you see in that young woman, that aha moment of self-discovery. And so why is that important? Why is self-discovery so important? Well, here are 5 reasons. First of all, we're most interested in what we actually discover, and we value it. When we know that it's helping us, we're more interested. How many times have you sat in a classroom at the back of the room listening to a boring lecture and taking notes because you know you're going to have an exam, but you would have rather been anywhere else? But when we are learning things through self-discovery, we are motivated because we're part of the process. We believe it's helping us, and it's becomes even contagious. It becomes infectious. Every one of us have had the experience where someone has, one of our friends has seen a movie or read a book, and they are so excited about it. They keep saying, oh, you need to see this movie. Oh, you have to read this book. Why are they that way? It's infectious because whatever we have discovered that has meant a lot to us, we want to share. And in fact, since I've been a pastor over 40 years, I would argue that's the way evangelism happens best. In my experience, evangelism doesn't happen because someone has heard 20 sermons about they should be sharing their faith in Jesus. Evangelism happens when Jesus becomes real and personal to people, and it becomes such a self-discovery that they can't help but not share it. They have to share it because it has had such a great impact on them. I believe most of the times we hear the Holy Spirit working in our lives, it's through this kind of self-discovery process. So we can put these side by side and see the differences between the two. And so again, I'm not saying that learning by telling doesn't have its place. I've done a lot of that, both as the person who was telling and also the person who was taking the notes. But today, we're trying to help us kind of readjust our thinking a little bit, that there's another way that also pays great rewards besides telling. So what happens with telling? Well, when we are the learner, we are passive. We are absorbing. Somebody is telling us things, and we are just supposed to do what they're telling us. And usually these people are some kind of an authority person. In the case of compassion, maybe it's the partner facilitator who is working with a church leader and saying, well, here's the way you should do this, and they're giving them information, they're telling them how to do it. And the outcome is we may value or we may not value that information. Learning by discovery is different. Number one, it's active. We have to be engaged in it for learning by discovery to work. That's what it is. I have to be engaged. I'm like the girl holding that flask up there. It doesn't happen unless I'm engaged in it. It also forces us to think for ourselves. Too much learning by telling and we lose the ability to actually solve our own problems. Every time we have a problem, we just go to whoever the authority figure is and say, okay, now what do I do? Learning by discovery is a way that actually lifts us up. It increases our own capacity to think critically, to dig deeper, to be able to explain ideas for ourselves. And the most important thing is, when we discover it by ourselves, we own it. It stays with us. So I've got a story that I always tell about my kids. We have 3 children. They're all grown now. But when they were little, we had an electric stove, like some of you probably have in your home. And you know, with an electric stove, when you turn the burner off, it still stays hot for a while. And so we were always giving our kids advice. We were always saying, don't touch the stove. The stove is hot. Don't touch the stove. Well, they got old enough to reach their hand up, and, you know, after all that good advice, one of them was curious one day, and they reached up and they touched the burner on the stove. What happened? Well, they burned their finger, and there were tears, and there was a little bit of upset. But do you know what the result was? Can you guess? They never, ever touched the stove again. In fact, not only did the one who burned their finger never go near the stove, the brother and sister who saw them burn their finger and saw them cry, they didn't go near the stove either. All 3 of them never went near the stove again because of that one moment of self-discovery. The stove is hot. It will burn you. Even after we'd given them all kinds of good advice, that one moment of self-discovery was all it took for them to change their behavior from then on. That's the power of self-discovery. Self-discovery, when we learn things for ourselves, we claim them, we own them, they stay with us. And I'll give you another example that has certainly been true for me, and I'm guessing it might be true for you. And that is, as I was growing up, my parents gave me lots of advice. You know, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. Sometimes I listened, sometimes I didn't. But as I got to be a young adult, I had to make my own decisions. You know, my parents weren't there. I couldn't just call them on the phone every time I needed to make a decision. And I made some mistakes. And I look back and I realized, you know, what they were telling me was actually wise, but I never really acted on it until I made the mistake, my own version of touching the stove, and realized, hey, I need to change this because this is not working. You know, there are lots of things in life that we learn through self-discovery that stay with us, and those are the things I would say really, really shape us. And so, what prevents this self-discovery learning? Well, in ordinary life, what prevents it most of all is Keith Webb, in his book, The Coach Model for Christian Leaders, calls it the disease of know-it-allism. And so what is a know-it-all person? Well, you've all met one. Maybe you even recognize that you have been one at times. A know-it-all person is the kind of person who wants to convince you how smart they are, how accomplished they are, how they know it all. And so their basic stance is, I show you how much I know. I know what the problem is. What I would have done is, I think what we ought to do is, etc. So it's always starting from, they know it all, and if we would just listen to them, everything would be great. There is a different kind of person who Keith Webb calls a learn-it-all person. And a learn-it-all person comes from a place of thinking, you know, I don't know it all. There are new things I can still learn. And so a learn-it-all person, instead of, prescribing and saying, giving advice and, just do what I tell you, a learn-it-all person tends to ask questions. Tell me what you think is going on. What went wrong? How might we improve next time? What could we do now? What are our options? How can I help you? Do you see how this makes perfect application in compassion for those who work with local church leaders? The partnership facilitators. A partnership facilitator who is a know-it-all person might be demonstrating, how much they know, and they probably do know a lot about how a local church needs to implement or execute the compassion program. But is that helping those local leaders really grow up so eventually they can execute the program more all by themselves? But a learn-it-all person is able to ask questions that allows that local church leader to engage themselves in the process, to have some self-discovery learning about what went wrong, about what we could do better next time, about what our options are, and so forth. And so as we think about this with coaching now, here's the generic definition of coaching from the International Coaching Federation. Coaching is partnering with coachees in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Okay? So the key idea here is when we are involved with coaching, what are we doing? We're helping provoke new thought. We're helping people be more creative. We are hopefully inspiring them. And the end goal of all of this thought-provoking, helping them be creative, inspiring, the end goal of all of that is to help maximize their potential. It goes on to say the coach's job is to provide support to enhance the skills, resources, creativity the coachee already has. This is one of the mindset shifts of the coaching mindset that is really important. Because most of us, I think, most of the time, think, I need to bring to you the skills, resources, and creativity that I have so I can solve your problem. I can help you out. I can tell you the right way to go or the right way to do something. But in coaching, that's all reversed. In coaching, we believe that that person we're trying to help already has skills, resources, and creativity. And our job as the coach is simply to support that, enhance that, help them claim that. And those are the ways that they are going to increase their leadership capacity. It's the whole missionary story about, do you give a person a fish or do you help them learn to fish? Okay, if you give the person a fish, great, you fed them for today, but tomorrow they'll be hungry and they'll come back to you for another fish. And, you can see that in your work in compassion. If every time you're just giving them the answer so they can move ahead with whatever the question is, the next time they have a problem or a question, they're right back there saying, okay, tell me what to do now. As opposed to helping people learn to fish. Definitely that takes longer. Learning to fish definitely takes longer. But the value is, after a while, people are fishing by themselves. They've become independent of us. They have increased their capacity to learn how to feed themselves and solve their own problems. So here are a couple of examples. When I first started coaching back in 2016, I was coaching young pastors here in the US. And at the end of usually about 6 coaching sessions, I would ask them, what was the value to you of this coaching that we've done together? And several of them wrote things that I think are great testimonies about this whole idea of self-discovery, that my job as their coach was to support and enhance the skills, resources, creativity they already had. Here's what one said. For me, coaching was like a drop of soap that broke the surface tension. Okay, you think of the water, you drop the drop of soap and it kind of moves outward in the water. It helped things flow more easily without being controlling. The energy and potential was already there. It just needed to be released. So this young pastor was saying, I already had the energy and potential I needed. Coaching just helped me release that so that I could be more effective. Here's another one. This is the one I like the best. I think the most rewarding benefit was the experience itself. Coaching still allowed me to accomplish my goals and gain clarity, and it left me with the comforting sense and confidence, I can do this. I have it in me to improve. That's my goal with every single person I coach. I want them to leave that experience with more confidence that they can do things on their own. Sometimes we think, we want people to feel dependent on us because that makes us feel good, like we're indispensable, like they can't get along without us. They need our knowledge, they need our experience. But the true mature leader is the person who wants people to go away and be able to be just as successful all by themselves, because that builds their leadership capacity and that builds the kingdom of God. And so this young pastor said, I left with the confidence I can do this. I have it in me to improve. That's the goal of coaching, friends. That every time we do a training class in compassion, every time we work with a local church leader, every time we have a team meeting where maybe we're leading it, people will leave that experience saying, I can do this. I have it in me to improve. And so to sum all this up, the process of self-discovery, of releasing what's already within a person, has two goals. The first goal is solving problems, helping people achieve the goals. But the more important goal, the second goal, the one that we may not think of as often, is to increase their capacity, that they will learn new skills, new ways of thinking, grow in maturity as a leader, that they can use these things in future situations when we're not there. That's the goal of coaching. That's how coaching fills a void, honestly, fills a void in human development and leadership development that often exists if people are not oriented around self-discovery learning and increasing the capacity of others. So remember, we're talking about conversations. Coaching exists through conversations. And the very first slide we looked at was Keith Webb saying, if you want to change your results, change your conversations. If you want to have better results, change how you're doing your conversations. And so who brings the content into a coaching conversation? Most of the time, because I would say from the time that I've lived in Ethiopia and as well as having many, many cohorts now discuss this, that Ethiopia tends to be an advice-giving culture, tends to be a culture based on telling, from someone who's here in the hierarchy to someone who's here in the hierarchy, and they're giving information. So I think culturally, the person who brings the content is the person who is kind of in the driver's seat. The teacher, the pastor, the professor, the compassion staff person working with local church leaders, etc. In coaching, that's reversed. So as you see on the slide, the content is the coachee's responsibility. So deciding the topic, choosing the goals, understanding the problem, telling the facts, the information, coming up with ideas, options, action steps, coming to new insights, making decisions, making commitments, all of that is the coachee's responsibility. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, if the coachee is going to be responsible for all the content, what is there left for me to do? But in fact, what's left for us to do as the coach is the most important part, because we can create the process by which our coachee comes to new and valuable content. So what does that process look like? Well, we establish trust, because no one is going to go deeper in their life unless they feel they can trust us. You know, if we don't have conversations built on trust, we'll never have different results. We are drawing out ideas and thoughts. We're going to hear after the break the difference between mentoring and coaching. Mentoring puts in, whereas coaching draws out. We are drawing out from the coachee their ideas and thoughts. We're doing that through listening actively and clarifying. We're doing that drawing out through asking questions that evoke new discoveries, new insights, helping people kind of see something in a new way. You know, they've always been looking at it this way, and suddenly they kind of take this off and they look around and they say, oh, you know, there's a whole new way of seeing this I never realized. We're challenging them occasionally by offering our own feedback. We're helping them create a plan of action, but they're the one doing it. We're helping them, and we're following up so that they know that we are there to support them through some accountability. So what does this look like? Well, here are just a couple of quick examples. In coaching, we do not share our content, but we draw out from the coachee. So, for example, instead of saying there are 3 things you need to know about this, we would ask a process question. Where could you find that information? Or instead of saying, I can give you a good book on that, we can say, well, where would you look for that information? Or if I were you, I'd sit down and tell him everything. You know, they've told us a story and we immediately give our content, our advice. Well, here's what you should do. You sit down, you tell them everything. And instead, we ask a process question. What options do you see? So hopefully it's clear that when we're in charge of the process, we're actually helping the coachee come to their own content. And we believe they will because of everything we've talked about so far today, because they have skills, resources, and creativity within themselves to develop their own content, which they will be able to do as they are in an environment that encourages, underline that word, encourages, when they're in an environment that encourages their own self-discovery learning. And so for coaching, we talk about 3 sets. This is also from Keith Webb's book. Today, we're talking about the mindset, the coaching mindset. So what does that mean? Well, coaching requires some mindset shifts from the ways we usually think about helping people. For example, the coach doesn't provide our answers, our content. We draw out the answers from the coachee. So what are some of the key ideas in this mindset? Well, we've covered them already, so this is just a little bit of a summary. Asking questions will generate better learning than simply giving advice. Our information isn't necessary because the coachee has their own perspective, focus, and courage. Do you remember in Martha's video when she said, when she started coaching people, people would come to her expecting advice? And she would say, no, You know, you have it within you to solve that problem for the self. You are the expert in your own life. Discovery is more powerful than us telling coachees our content. Internal change is transformational and produces fundamental solutions to problems. As coaches, we are all about transformational change. That's why this course is called Coaching for Transformation. And as I said in the introductory video that I hope you will watch if you haven't already, when we say coaching for transformation, we're thinking of two people. The first person we're thinking of is, guess what? Ourselves. Because we need to be transformed. We need to have a new and different mindset. We need to set aside the advice-giving, know-it-all mindset and adopt a coaching, learn-it-all mindset. And so the transformational change happens first in us, but then we are able to create an empowering environment where that change can happen in other people. It's not about you and what you have to offer, it's about your coachees. Okay, so this is the mindset in just a very bullet form summary. But there are two other sets. There's also a skill set, okay? And so sessions 2, 3, and 4 will be talking about what are the skills in this coaching skill set. You know, it's like, you know, you have a tool belt and you have different tools. And so you can pull out a different tool depending on what the issue is. So it says for leaders who are accustomed to talking, offering solutions and sharing their own experience, the biggest challenge is to stop talking. We know how to talk, but not how to listen or how to ask. Good coaches rely on these skills. So active listening, we're going to talk next time in session 2 a lot about listening. Asking powerful questions that initiate changes of thinking. Session 3, we're going to really focus in on questions and also generating feedback, especially that avoids defensiveness. A lot of times when we have good intentions to give feedback, but all it does is make the other person feel defensive because to them, it feels like we're judging them. How do we give feedback without it sounding like judging? We're going to talk about that. Expanding awareness that creates new learning, helping them design action steps that will actually be accomplished. Why will they actually be accomplished? Because they are going to choose them. And so they are invested in the action steps they choose rather than us saying, well, you need to do this and then do this and then do this. And finally, following up to increase learning and accountability. So that's the skill set. And then the last thing is a tool set. And if you decide to go on to our advanced course, that's where we talk about the tool set. The coaching is a learning process, not a teaching process. So many of the teaching tools that we regularly use, if we're a professor in a classroom, for example, cannot be used in coaching. Coaching tools flow from a coaching mindset and use a coaching skill set. So in this course, we're talking about the mindset, we're talking about the skill set. Eventually, if you'd like, you can take our advanced course and then we'll talk about how they are put together in this tool set that will pull everything together. Thanks for watching this video, but you're not done yet, because in coaching, one of the best ways we actually learn is reflecting on what we have just experienced. And so before you move on to something else, I invite you to take just 60 seconds and think for yourself about the questions that are going to appear on the screen. Reflect on these questions and how you can take away something practical for you from what you have just watched and heard.